Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to break down one of the most misunderstood and frustrating parts of elk hunting: wind in the timber. A lot of elk hunters think they understand wind. They've heard the basics: thermals rise in the mid morning, fall in the evening when the shade hits, play the wind, and you'll be fine. But once you step into thick timber, that simple understanding starts to fall apart pretty fast. The wind doesn't move clean. It doesn't stay consistent. It swirls, it stalls, it drops, and it shifts in ways that can blow an opportunity before you even know what happened, and elk know it. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter and outdoorsman. In this episode, I'm going to show you how wind actually behaves in timber, how elk use it to their advantage, and how to adjust your movement so that you stop getting busted in situations that feel unpredictable and start turning those same conditions into opportunities. Timber wind confuses a lot of elk hunters because you can't see it, and more importantly, it doesn't always behave in a clean and predictable way. In open country, you can read wind with your eyes, you can watch grass move, you can see thermals rise off slopes, and you can feel consistent direction across a ridge or basin. But once you step into thick timber, all of that disappears. The trees break it up. Deadfall disrupts flow. Terrain features like benches, pockets, and small draws all start redirecting it in ways that aren't obvious. What you're left with is fragmented wind. Instead of one consistent direction, you often get multiple microcurrents moving differently within the same area. One step, you're good. 10 yards later, your wind is going somewhere completely different. And that's where a lot of elk hunters get into trouble. They rely on general wind direction or what the forecast says, assuming it applies the same way in timber. But it doesn't. The environment is just too complex. And because they can't clearly see or predict it, they either move with false confidence or freeze up completely. Until you understand how broken and localized timber wind really is, you're going to keep getting busted in situations that seem random but aren't. To understand timber wind, you have to stop thinking in terms of one direction and start thinking in layers. There's the big picture wind, the general direction based on weather or terrain. And then there's what actually matters in timber: micro movement, small currents breaking off, colliding, dropping, or rising, all within short distances. As thermals interact with trees, deadfall, and uneven ground, they lose consistency. Instead of flowing cleanly uphill or downhill, they get interrupted. They hit obstacles, split, curl, and create small pockets where wind either swirls or just hangs. And that's where you're going to feel a steady wind on a ridge, then step into the timber and suddenly it's inconsistent. You might get a brief pull uphill, then a stall, then a slight drop, all within seconds. Those are eddies and dead zones, and elk live in them. They position themselves where wind is most unpredictable for you, but still readable for them. Areas where your scent can't move cleanly, but they can still pick it apart in pieces. If you treat timber wind like it should behave clean and predictable, you're already behind. You have to hunt it for what it actually is: broken, localized, and constantly changing. The biggest mistake a lot of elk hunters make in timber is believing that the wind is predictable. They go in with a plan based on what should happen. Morning thermals should rise, evening thermals should fall. The forecast says a steady west wind, so they commit to an approach assuming those conditions are going to hold. But in timber, should doesn't mean anything. That clean uphill pull you felt 50 yards back, it breaks apart once it hits thick cover. That steady directional wind, it gets disrupted by terrain and structure the moment it enters the timber. And now you're moving forward with confidence while your scent is doing something completely different than you think. And that's how you get busted without warning. It's not bad luck, it's misplaced trust in the wind. In my experience, elk survive by living in that gap between what hunters expect the wind to do and what it's actually doing. They bed and move in places where wind is just unstable enough to protect them. If you rely on predictability, you're going to keep forcing setups that feel right but fail. The shift is this: stop assuming and start verifying, because in timber, the moment you trust the wind without checking it, you've already lost control of the situation. Elk don't fight timber wind, they use it. In thick cover, elk consistently position themselves where wind wind gives them the highest level of security. Not where it's perfectly consistent, but where it's just predictable enough for them and unpredictable enough for you. They bed in locations where thermals and terrain combine to create layered protection. They might have a general downhill thermal at some point, but they'll also position themselves so that any shifting or swirling current carries scent from below, above, or across their position in pieces. That's the key. Coverage. They're not relying on one clean wind direction. They're using multiple air movements to sample everything around them. This is why elk and timber can feel almost impossible to approach. You're trying to stay clean in one direction while they're monitoring multiple directions. They also use structure like benches, small drops, pockets of thick timber, all to break up airflow even more. Those areas create subtle wind advantages that are hard to detect unless you're paying pretty close attention. So when you get busted in timber, it's rarely random. You stepped into a zone where the elk already had the advantage, and the wind exposed you before you ever saw them. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory, it's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. Approaching elk and timber isn't about finding a perfect wind either. It's about managing exposure. A lot of elk hunters try to stay directly downwind or directly crosswind, assuming that keeps them safe. But in timber, that straight line thinking can get you in trouble. Your scent doesn't travel in a clean line. It leaks, drifts, and breaks apart. So instead of thinking safe direction, I would challenge you to think about safe angle. In my experience, the best approaches in timber come from slightly offset angles, never committing fully into the wind, but also not letting your scent drift directly into where elk are likely positioned. You're constantly working the edge their direction, not avoiding it entirely. You also have to use terrain to control your exposure. Move along features that help contain or redirect wind in your favor, like benches, side hills, small rises, anything that can limit how freely your scent can move. Avoid dropping straight into them or coming directly uphill into bedding areas where thermals and swirl combine. And most importantly, you've got to slow down. Timber punishes speed. Every step forward without verifying the wind is going to increase your chances of getting picked off. Good approaches aren't aggressive. They're controlled, patient, and constantly adjusted based on what the wind is doing in real time. In timber, knowing when not to move is just as important as knowing when to go. A lot of elk hunters feel pressure to keep advancing. They get within range, the situation feels close, and they push forward hoping to make something happen. But if the wind is unstable, every step increases the odds of getting busted. Consistent elk hunters recognize unstable wind windows pretty early on. If the wind is shifting, stalling, or cycling unpredictably, that's not a green light, it's a warning. That's when you slow down or stop completely. You wait for consistent pull, even if it only lasts a few minutes, and you move during that window. Timing matters more than distance here. Midday often gives you the most stable conditions in timber, especially when thermals settle and directional winds take over. Early morning and late evening can be more volatile as thermals are transitioning during those times. The key is patience. Instead of forcing movement because you're close, you wait until the conditions give you an actual advantage. And when they do, you move with purpose and get it done. Because in timber, pushing at the wrong time doesn't just cost you an opportunity, it also educates elk and makes the next move even harder. And this is where understanding timber wind actually pays off, when conditions stop matching your expectations. Take a mid-morning setup where thermals should be pulling uphill, but instead they start stalling and dropping into pockets of timber. Most hunters just keep moving, assuming it's going to correct itself. But if you're paying attention, you recognize that transition early and you stop. You wait for a clean pole or adjust your position before scent slips downhill into elk you never saw. Or consider a north-facing slope in the afternoon. It looks ideal, cool, shaded, perfect bedding cover. But the wind starts swirling as the thermals weaken and directional winds try to take over. A lot of hunters push into it anyway and get busted. I've been there. A disciplined hunter reads the instability and either changes the angle or backs out entirely. And then there's closing distance in thick bedding cover. You're within range, but the wind is inconsistent. Instead of forcing the final move, you hold position, monitor the air, and wait for a brief window where it stabilizes, then move decisively. Those situations happen every single day. The difference is whether you recognize what the wind is doing or you ignore it and you pay for it. If you want to get better in timber, you need a simple system you can rely on, not guesswork. So start with constant verification. Don't trust what the wind should be doing. Check it. Use powder or your milkweed or any visual indicator as often as you need. Every move you make should be based on what the wind is doing right now, not what it did 5 minutes ago. Next, limit your exposure. Instead of trying to force perfect conditions, focus on reducing how much your scent can travel. Use terrain to your advantage. Stay on edges. Avoid dropping directly into areas where wind collects and swirls. Then, build patience into your approach. If the wind isn't stable, you don't move. You wait. Even short, consistent windows are enough if you're ready for them. And finally, review every encounter. When you get busted or when things go right, ask why. What was the wind doing? Where did it go? What did you miss? That loop, verify, limit, wait, evaluate, that becomes your system. And once you commit to it, timber stops feeling unpredictable and starts becoming something you can actually manage. At the end of the day, wind in the timber isn't impossible to understand. It's just unforgiving if you misread it. Most blown opportunities don't happen because elk are unpredictable. They happen because the wind is doing something the hunter didn't recognize or chose to ignore. That's the difference. You can't control the wind, but you can control how you respond to it. You can slow down, verify what it's actually doing, and move only when conditions give you an advantage. That takes discipline. It takes patience. There's going to be a lot of guys that comment on this video and tell me that this is baloney and it's all luck and that I'm, blowing this way out of proportion. And those guys aren't going to kill as many elk because it takes the willingness to back out when things aren't right, even when you're close. But that's what separates hunters who consistently get into elk in the timber from those who keep getting busted. Because in thick cover, success isn't about forcing opportunities. It's about recognizing the moment when everything lines up and being ready to act when it does. Now, if you want to go deeper into elk movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the elk hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how elk actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. If you want hands-on application and real-time breakdowns, we have an in-person Elk Camp 2026 that's built around this same philosophy: structure, preparation, and execution in real terrain. 90% of Elk Camp is going to be running hands-on scenarios. You can check out Elk Camp at backboneunlimited.com. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of elk resources, private discussions, and direct communication with me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.